Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the live stream. I hope you're all very well this evening. Let's see who we have on tonight. We have Adam. Great to see you, Adam. Enzo the God. Great to see you. Eki Boy. Great to see you too. Boomerage. Great to have you on. James. Great to see you. Norflinger. Great to have you on. Raven 1983 Witch. Great to see you too. Conservator. Hope you're well. Ronnie. Lenan. Who else have we got? Chatty Rat. Great to see you too. We also have Fearless Wolf, great to have you on. Hope you're well. We have Ben, great to see you. CGM, great to have you on. John O'Sullivan, too. Hope you're doing very well, John. Freddie B, great to see you, Freddie. Oraman, Paul Roshin, great to see you. Who else have we got? Colin, Bina Mac, good to see you. Chris, Katie, another Chris. Sock Juice, great to see you. Sock Juice. I love some of the names that come on here are amazing. Giblets for the Cats, great to see you. Arsberger, great to have you on. We have Buxton, great to see you too, Buxton. Mega Hairy Bomb is another one. Paul and Mark Teffler, sorry. Kieran Toss, great to see you, and Jem is on as well. I hope everyone's very well tonight. Hope you're having a great you had a great weekend. Conservator, thank you so much for that super chat. First super chat just to piss off Nadia. See, I'm not sure what that's about, but thanks very much for that. Very kind of you. Hope you're all very well. Hope you had a great weekend. And of course, we're going to talk about Liz Truss tonight. The cost of living crisis, and also the insults to the Scottish people. I said before, if the SNP and the independence movement wanted to convince people to vote yes to for self-determination, all they'd have to do is put up posters of Boris Johnson. But now it seems it maybe would be a better idea putting up posters of Liz Truss. Because I didn't actually think somebody could be as bad as Boris Johnson or worse than Boris Johnson. But Liz Truss has knocked it right out of the park. You know, whatever you want to say about Boris Johnson, he wasn't popular. Excuse me. He wasn't popular, but he never really insulted the Scots. Like, okay, yes, during Prime Minister's questions, excuse me, bit of a frog in my throat. During Prime Minister's questions, he ignored the SNP. He, talked up the union, ignored their questions, ignored their comments, didn't treat them very well. He even fat-shamed Ian Blackford at one stage. But he never said, I'm going to ignore the Scottish government. And Liz Truss came out and said yesterday, yeah, I'm going to ignore the Scottish government. I'm going to ignore Liz Truss said I'm going to ignore Nicola Sturgeon. And that's bad because you're supposed to work with the Scottish government. You can say the Scottish government, I don't agree with their policies. I don't agree with the Nicola Sturgeon on everything, but we're going to work together for the best of the United Kingdom, or for the best of the Union, or whatever. She could have dealt with this in a much better way. She could have said, look, I don't agree with Nicola Sturgeon, but she's the First Minister in Scotland. She worked with Boris Johnson during the pandemic, and I want to work with her too. That's what she could have said, but no, she didn't want to say that. Anyway, we're going to get to that. Excuse me. Oh my goodness. We're going to get to that a little bit later, but I wanted to start off with, it says here, Liz Truss U-turns on plan to cut public sector pay outside London. Now, the Scottish debacle, the Scottish gaffe, if you want to call it, even though I don't think it's a gaffe, this is really what the Tories are thinking about Scotland. But that's one thing. But this could be much more serious to her campaign. Genocide Jim, thanks so much for that super chat. Liz Truss is too thick to realise the damage she's done, not even in office, and support for independence already rising. Bring her on. Yeah, it's I said before, when Boris Johnson would visit Scotland, he'd have to be smuggled in under the cover of darkness and smuggled out. And, at least he was Prime Minister. Liz Truss isn't even elected Prime Minister yet by the Tories, and she's already doing massive damage to the Union. You're better off just shutting up than coming out with the rubbish that she did. Thanks so much, Genocide Jim. It says here, Liz Truss has been forced to U-turn on plans to cut civil service pay outside London after a furious outcry from Conservative MPs and the Conservative Tees Valley Mayor. Rishi Sunak called the policy a dramatic U-turn, which reveals more than a change of heart, and said it could cost it could have a high cost for the party. If this was in a general election, it would have been potentially a fatal own goal for the Conservatives. Of course, this is Rishi Sunak trying to claw back some support, and this was a massive mistake. So what happened? Well, we'll get to that in a moment. A spokesperson for Truss's leadership campaign said it had been willfully misrepresented. There had been a willful misrepresentation of her campaign without giving specifics, but confirmed she was abandoning plans for regional pay boards for civil servants or public sector workers. Red Wall MPs, including Jacob Young and Richard Holden, raised alarm at the policy announcement overnight, as well as the former cabinet minister Simon Hart, who said it would amount to cuts of nearly £3,000 for workers in Wales. There's a cost of living crisis, and Liz Truss is talking about, well, I'm going to cut your wages even more. Her opponent Sunak's campaign said the £8.8 billion in saving on pay outside London touted in a release by Truss on Monday night could only be made with cuts across the whole public sector, including teachers, nurses and the armed forces, estimating an average of about £1,500 each for employees outside the southeast of England. Yeah, so the idea, it's not just certain workers are going to lose a huge amount of money. Well, it's probably going to include teachers, nurses and the armed forces. So that wouldn't have gone down very well in Tory constituencies. So the Tories said, no, do a U-turn. Don't worry about U-turns. Boris Johnson has been doing so many over the last two or 3 years, so it's okay if you do a U-turn too. But this isn't going to go down well in. It's not going to help her campaign. I don't know if it will sink it. I think it'll certainly do a significant amount of damage, but she may be able to recover. By midday on Tuesday, Truss's campaign admitted that it would ditch the plan and said it had not been in the intention to cut pay. Current levels of public sector pay will absolutely be maintained, a Truss spokesperson said. Anything to suggest otherwise is simply wrong. Our hard-working frontline staff are the bedrock of society, and there will be no proposal taken forward on regional pay boards for civil servants or public sector workers. Magic, thanks so much for that super chat. Gibson and Hoching were supporting it in the morning and then rolling it back in the afternoon after public backlash. You have these Tories who will, whatever Liz Truss says, if they're backing Liz Truss, whatever she says, they'll support it without actually knowing what it's all about. Which is a perfect insight into Liz Truss herself. Liz Truss will support things without actually understanding them. This is what I believe when it came to voting Remain. I think she supported Remain when it came to Brexit because she thought that's the way things were going. And then when she realised, oh, actually people voted against that, then she became a Brexiteer. So what does she actually believe? I don't know. And what do her supporters actually believe? I don't know. Thanks for that super chat, Magic. Gareth, thank you so much too. Should take a page from Mick Lynch's book and go for a trial by combat. That'd be wonderful. Frau Pork Markets versus Nicola Independence Eye Sturgeon up the Scots. Yeah, I should fight it out. That would be. What would a Nicola Sturgeon's weapon of choice be? I don't know, a claymore, and what would Liz Truss's weapon of choice be? I don't know, a boomerang maybe. It tends to come back. You throw it and it comes back to hit you in the face. Freckle Bunny, thank you so much for that super chat. Cameron, May, Johnson, Truss and partners breaking up the UK since 2010. I think some people say that Margaret Thatcher supported Scottish independence because she realised that with Scotland out of the way, the Tories would have a pretty much permanent majority. And while I don't think this is really the design here, I think the union will break up through neglect. There are people who within the Conservative Party who would be very happy to see Scotland go. But the others treat Scotland like a county or like a region, and they don't believe it's a real country, and they don't believe that it should have. They consider the Scots as second-class citizens, and others I think view it all as a tantrum. Oh, they don't like Westminster, and that's why that's why they want to go, and it's a tantrum, and they don't know what they're getting themselves into, and we'll have to bail them out or something like that. This is the attitude. There are multiple attitudes when it comes to Scottish independence from the Tory point of view, and it's going to happen, and then it's going to be okay. On whose watch was it? And it's likely going to be on Liz Truss's watch. So Boris Johnson got out before things got really bad. It's not him that set the ball rolling, but he pushed it along. And it's likely that Scotland will vote to leave the Union under Liz Truss's watch. And this is probably this moment will be remembered in history as, yes, this was the straw that broke the camel's back. There are people, and I'll get to this later, but there are people who were sitting on the fence and they saw Liz Truss's response to the question and said, okay, they don't care about Scotland. They don't care that Scotland elected its own government. They have no respect for... One thing is having no respect for Nicola Sturgeon, another is no respect for the people she represents. And that's what's more important. Thanks so much for that super chat. The Freckle Pony, yes, sorry. Just the screen keeps moving for some reason. Gareth again, thanks so much for that. The Sturgeon's weapon of choice, common fucking sense. Is it better than a claymore? Yes. It's there was a wonderful image of Nicola Sturgeon standing outside Number 10, and you had David Cameron next to her. Then you had Theresa May, then Boris Johnson, and then she's standing outside with nobody, and she's like waiting. Like she has overseen all of these, and she's still popular in Scotland. She's more popular than any other, I wouldn't say any other politician in the UK, but definitely any other political leader. Although the bar has been set pretty low at the moment. It goes on to say the first major gaffe from Truss, who was favoured to win the race, delighted some MPs supporting Sunak. One with one calling for her dementia tax moment, referencing the time when why am I reading it like this? Referencing the time the former Conservative Prime Minister Theresa May was forced to U-turn on her social care policy. Yeah, so Theresa May wanted to bring in some the run up to the 2017 was it? Yeah, 2017 general election. Theresa May came out with some ridiculous policy. and she had to U-turn at the last minute, and it really done a lot of damage to her campaign. She was expected to win a majority, and then that and other things put her in a very bad position. Gordon Little, thank you so much for that super chat. Truss will be the leader. Truss will be leader as she is comfortably and can be used as a scapegoat for the breakup of the UK. Yeah, it's a terrible. Thanks for that, Gordon. It's a terrible, what would you say, weight to carry. It's a terrible plaque to hang on your wall. I broke up the UK. Now that's okay if you want to see the UK broken up, but they're supposed to be the Conservative and Unionist Party, and it's possible that Liz Truss is being selected because she's the one that will break up the union. And the Tories may say, look, it'll be a bitter pill for many of us, but look on the bright side, we'll have a pretty much permanent majority as long as PR doesn't come in. As a belligerent Englishman, Scotland, you have my support in whatever you choose to do. And I think there are more and more people south of the border supporting Scotland as well because of what happened yesterday. Sonic backer Mark Harper criticised Truss's campaign for claiming her plans had been misrepresented. Stop blaming journalists. Reporting what a press release says isn't willful misrepresentation, he tweeted. Sonic's campaign has suggested Truss had pushed for the policy in 2018 when she was Chief Secretary to the Treasury. That wasn't a mistake. Liz wanted this in 2018 as CST. The lady is for turning, a campaign source said in another pointed reference to Thatcher. Sunak's spokesperson said the policy showed Truss's flaws as a candidate. It demonstrates a lack of serious judgment by setting out plans that would see pay dramatically cut for police. Police, of course, you don't touch those. Nurses and our armed forces, those as well. Nurses, the Tories don't care about, but they don't want to be seen cutting the salaries of the police and the armed forces. In Cardiff and Canterbury, Teesside and Taunton, during the cost of living crisis, it also shows a worrying lack of grip on detail in what is already a woolly economic policy. So it's Liz Truss throwing stuff out, and I think this is a big problem here, is that Liz Truss is surrounding herself by people who are ideologues and don't understand either policy, they don't understand economics, and they don't understand the reaction from the public. They don't understand how the public operates or thinks. And they're just throwing out these policies thinking it'll be cool, it will attract enough support within the Conservative Party to help her cross the line, to help her win. And once again, she's been given very bad advice. Alistair says, Max, do you know that the union now is now reserved to Wastemonster? So instead of the Constitution, now moving the goalposts again on Indy. Yeah, I heard something about that, where there, it's this constant moving of the goalposts, saying, oh no, you can't have the referendum for this reason, or you can't have it for that reason, and there's an attempt to continually undermine democracy in Scotland. And I think these are all obstacles. They're throwing as many obstacles in the way of a referendum as possible. Then when the referendum happens, they're going to throw as much crap you would not believe on Nicola Sturgeon, on the SNP, on the independence movement. They won't actually talk about the benefits of the union. They'll scaremonger about independence, but they'll also be doing as much dirt digging as possible into the SNP and Nicola Sturgeon, because they won't fight on, okay, these are the benefits of being a member of the UK, because they understand that the people in charge, be it Boris Johnson or Liz Truss, are not actually helping the people of Scotland. The benefits are very few and far between. And it makes more sense for Scotland to go it alone. Liz Truss spitting image is the first one that looks better than the real counterpart. You should have heard what Truss said about the leader of Gornland. If she sets foot on Gorntopia again, we'll eat her. There's a Gorn theme tonight. Johnson was too much of a wild card. Truss will be a reliable, steady puppet of the ERG. For the ERG, their coup is complete. Yeah, the fact that she met with the ERG and members of the ERG came out and said she believes more in Brexit than we do, told you everything you needed to know. Benefits, are there any? Flags. You get a nice colourful flag. That's not enough. Just sticking with Liz Truss for a moment. It says here, she says, "I love Britain. We are a great country, and our best days are still ahead of us. I can deliver them. I can help deliver them." This idea, I love Britain. Once again, this plastic patriotism. We are a great country. Our best days, in reference, of course, to Brexit. Yes, Brexit, sunlit uplands, they're just around the corner. And this works on people. Some people lap this crap up. And many of them, once again, this is for consumption within the Conservative Party. This is not for really general consumption, but this is about showing how much of a patriot she is, because she has a flag behind her, because she loves Britain. She says she loves Britain, and it's a great country. It's a pity that she's now supporting the destruction of Britain, the destruction of the United Kingdom, and the destruction of the British economy. But she doesn't care about that.
There's no doubting the momentum behind Liz Truss. Cheered on in Exeter last night, she delivered her latest pledge to the party faithful.
This is partly about challenging not just the Treasury orthodoxy, but the Whitehall orthodoxy and getting things done. And I'm prepared to break eggs to make the omelette.
Today, though, a policy misstep has unravelled. Liz Truss pledged a civil service shake-up that would save £11 billion a year, £8.8 billion of which would come by adjusting wages for regional jobs, effectively paying government workers less in poorer parts of the country.
See, the problem for Liz Truss is that she knows that the party is moving to the right, but not everyone is moving to the right. And this idea, she probably thought, okay, yeah, I'm going to cut public services, I'm going to cut jobs, I'm going to cut wages. That's going to be really popular with the far right within the party, the Jacob Rees-Moggs, the Brexit hardman Steve Baker types. And yes, it is popular with them, but they don't represent all of the party. And obviously the rest of the party felt, look, if you do this, this is going to damage us. Turn around. Call it back immediately. Number 3, thanks so much for that super chat. The Tories' minimal government mantra is criminal because they have never defined what minimum means. Exactly. And this whole idea of government exists to funnel money to the private sector. That's in their eyes what government is. These so-called libertarians. It's about creating laws to help companies, not individuals or members of the public or workers in particular. It's about helping businesses to make more money. That's what it's all about. If you give me money, if you fund my campaign, if you donate to my party, what I'll do is I will make sure that I create legislation to allow you to do whatever the hell you want. Sack your employees without a moment's notice. Yeah, I'll create laws to allow you to do that. Allow you to pump raw sewage into rivers and lakes. Yeah, sure. I can't produce legislation to allow you to do that, but what I can do is I can turn a blind eye. And this is how it works. It's about allowing government in the eyes of these people is its sole function is to help businesses. It's not to help people, not to help the environment, not to help workers, not to create a more equal society or fair society. No, it's not about that. It's about protecting businesses, because the businesses donate to me directly or to my party, and I give them something in return. I, on the other hand, believe that the role of government should be at least fundamentally to look after the health and education and the well-being of citizens, providing health and education and making sure that people have the means to live, to look out. If they can't afford to pay their bills, the government need to step in. That's what should be happening. And we'll get to that a bit later on. Thanks for that, number 3. Fearless, thank you so much for that super chat. The Irish would disagree with that. Disagree with what? I don't remember what I was saying. Thanks for that super chat. Maybe I'll check in a moment what you were talking about there. Paul Taylor, thank you so much, Paul. If a bear does things in the woods and the Pope is Catholic, does that mean that the UK is doomed? It's a strange analogy, but yes, it is. It's see, on the unionist side, you have nobody presenting any real arguments to defend the union. All you have is people trying to stop independence. But then the shenanigans of yesterday are helping independence. Boris Johnson was an asset for independence. Liz Truss is going to be, if she becomes Prime Minister, an asset for independence. See, the Tories are sort of split in a way. There are Tories who would be happy to see Scotland go, but there are others who realise that Scotland provides a huge amount of money for the Exchequer, so they don't want it to go. So you have the economic argument of, well, we need to hold on to Scotland. And then you have the ideological argument of, well, if we get rid of it, we can strengthen our position in Westminster. It's it's the Labour Party are not picking up a lot of seats are not going to be picking up a lot of seats in the future in Scotland. Scotland is basically SNP under SNP control, and it's going to remain that way unless something major happens. The Tories have given up on Scotland. The Labour Party are likely to give up on Scotland. And then what? But this is going to be difficult for the Labour Party. It's easier for the Tories to maintain power if Labour are not winning seats in Scotland. In Scotland, the Labour Party have one seat. Just one seat. They used to have 45 or 50 something seats, and now they're down to one. I think they were at 0 at one stage, but then they went back up to 1. But they're not going back to where they were before. So the union is on life support, and you have a sort of struggle between some Tories who want to pull the plug and others who want to hold it in. Let me just find Fearless. The UK is a great country. Okay, sorry. Yes, the UK is a great. That's what the Irish say. The UK is a great country. I'm not sure which Irish you're talking about there. Thanks for that super chat. Anyway, we have one from Reagan Elite. Did someone say UBI? Well, I definitely look. I promised to talk a little bit about UBI in a moment when we get to the cost of living segment. But I promise to do that. And if I don't, one of the mods can slap me on the wrist for that. Garrett, thanks so much for that super chat. Correction, Max. They're not businesses. They're charlatans, liars, crooks, and thieves. Decent government should support the former, not the latter. Yes, you're right. 100%.
The backlash came almost immediately.
Well, the policy of cutting the pay for northern teachers, police officers and civil servants seems like a surefire way to lose the next general election. And the idea that the north people in the north should somehow be paid less compared to counterparts in the southeast for doing the same job is completely counterintuitive to the levelling up agenda.
As experts warn that to make the savings, the plan would impact not just government departments, but teachers, nurses, police officers. Allies rallied to defend it.
We need a smaller civil service. We have 91,000 more people working for the civil service than we did in 2016. We need to get back to the 2016 level.
Why? Why do you need to go back to the 2016 level model? Why do you have to go back to those levels? The population has increased. There is a bigger request for public services. So if there's more request for public services, you should be increasing the number of people working in the public sector, not reducing it. It's like saying, okay, I have a supermarket. More and more people are coming in to buy stuff. Means I have to hire more staff to work on the tills or to pack shelves or whatever. You don't say, oh, there are more and more people coming in to buy stuff in my supermarket. I'm going to cut my staffing levels. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But then this is Jacob Rees-Mogg. Number 3, thanks so much for that super chat. Viva la Revolution. Don't pay UK. Don't pay UK. This is something. I'll just jump to this for a moment because it's not something I was planning to cover, but it is a video I uploaded recently about a campaign that's gaining more and more support at the moment. The idea of on the 1st of October, it's likely the price of energy bills are going to rise again, and many people, of course, can't afford these rises. Many people can't afford the bills at the moment. And there's a grassroots campaign that's asking people to sign up on their website to say that they will not pay their bills on the 1st of October. Now, let me correct that. Clarify that. It's not that people will not pay, is that they will switch off their direct debit and they will pay using a paper bill. So in a sense, they will pay their bills, but not immediately. And the idea behind this is that these companies would not have access to people's money immediately. They would have to wait for it. Now, some people are also talking about not paying any bills at all, refusing to pay, and this would force the government or these energy companies to cut their prices. There are a number of issues with this, concerns, not issues, but concerns about protecting people's data, and also the consequences, because if in some cases, if you don't pay your bills, you can have your power cut off, or in some cases you may be forced to have a prepaid meter installed. You could be taken to court, and you could be fined. So there are concerns about this. It is something needs to happen. Something really does need to happen. And it seems to be happening at the worst possible time politically as well, because Boris Johnson is not interested in doing anything. And the two idiots you have in charge, Liz Truss doesn't understand what the cost of living crisis is. It just doesn't understand. And Rishi Sunak doesn't understand what a crisis is because he's never experienced one. So one is disconnected because of the amount of money he has, and the other is disconnected because her brain is disconnected completely, permanently disconnected from reality. So you have the worst of both worlds. You have in number 10 at the moment somebody who just doesn't care, and then you have on the other side of that 2 idiots who don't understand. And something is going to break. I don't know what it is. I don't know what will be the catalyst, but something will happen. It's inevitable. People don't have money to pay their bills today. On the 1st of October, they're going to rise even more significantly. And that's just gas bills. That's just energy bills. That does not include general inflation, which is running at between 10 and 11%. How are people supposed to buy food, buy clothes, put petrol in their cars, do ordinary things? Something is going to break. Thanks Thanks for that super chat. Alistair says, Max, they used all the arguments in 2014, and they had muck on Nikki and the SNP. They would have used it by now if they had muck on. Yeah, I'm not saying that they have muck on her. I'm just saying that they will invent stuff. You know, we're talking about Vote Leave and Leave.eu. These are the people, you know, who are now in the employment of the Conservative Party. And they're going to be looking around for whatever tools they can use. So I don't think they're going to actually find anything, but they're going to use whatever tools they can to convince the people of Scotland that, you know, independence would be a bad idea, or that there's a silent majority against independence. I don't think it's going to work, but they will definitely try. No DLC, thanks so much for that super chat. Caution, don't pay UK, have it wrong. Utility bills are not like the poll tax, where impact of those losses are limited to government. Largest shareholders are ordinary pensioners and insurance. Yeah, this is something that's not mentioned in a lot of the media reports, is who are the shareholders. They've been talking about rising energy prices and how the shareholders are benefit. So the private companies, the wholesale energy companies, are making billions. I think Shell is talking about £6 billion profit this quarter or last quarter, and it's not them that's suffering. Ordinary people are suffering, but the shareholders. Some of the shareholders are probably wealthy people, but not all of them, because a lot of shareholders are related to pension funds. A lot of pension funds, build up capital or build up money within them via, and I know nothing about this really, but via investments spread across different parts of the economy. So they may see, oh, well, look, energy prices are going up. Energy companies. It's a good idea to invest in energy companies at the moment. This is something that the stockbrokers or the insurance management funds are doing. This is their job, is to maximize the investment, and they change from time to time. And at the moment, it's energy companies. So if people don't pay, it could harm this, but I don't know if that's a justification. I don't know which side to fall on, because I understand something has to happen, something has to change. The ideal situation would be for the government to intervene, the government to nationalize these companies and set the price of energy so that people are not struggling. People are able to pay the bills. That's what should happen. But we have the Tories in charge, and they're not interested. For ideological reasons, and I also think there's a bit of corruption there as well. Thanks, no DLC. So I think it is important for people not to take my word for it, not to take the word of don't pay, but do some research. Be sure what you're doing before whatever action you're going to take. But once again, I think it's very important that the government intervene here. They provide financial support to ordinary individuals, ordinary people, but they also take a different approach to the current ideas towards privatization. I think a number of industries need to be nationalized because they're core industries. They're things that we need as citizens. We need energy. We can't. This is not like mobile phone companies even, or video games or something like this. This is something that is fundamental for society, and I think the idea of leaving it in private hands is extremely problematic. Gareth, I missed your other super chat. No need. Need more staff to deal with Brexit red tape happen. Haha. Yes. That's what somebody should say back to Jacob Rees-Mogg. But all this Brexit red tape, surely you need more staff for that. That's where most of the employment is at the moment. The Brexiteer government are creating lots of jobs at the moment dealing with red tape. Welcome to Pay or Die. and this is what's this is the problem. It's my advice to people is to do your own research. Don't listen to what I have to say, but do your own research and understand what is best for you, because everyone's situation is different. But something is going to break, and the government will have to intervene in some way. If we look at what happened with the pandemic, the government eventually intervened and provided the furlough scheme, which was, for most people, a lot of people were left out of it, but for a lot of people, it was life support. Something like that has to happen again. But I think the solution, of course, is to nationalize the energy companies.
That on its own will save about £3.5 billion, potentially more.
But it's not just the civil service, is it? Liz Truss is also talking about anyone's pay for the government. That involves teachers, that involves police officers, involves nurses, doesn't it?
That's not the plan. The discussion at the moment is around civil servants.
Soon after, though, came this, a statement from Team Truss saying over the last few hours there's been a willful misrepresentation of our campaign. Current levels of public sector pay will absolutely be maintained. Anything to suggest otherwise is simply wrong. Our hard-working frontline staff are the bedrock of society. And
once again, this is just about, oh, look, I threw something out there to some red meat to the far right within the Conservative Party. It's pissed off other people within the Conservative Party that I need roll it back. And blame the media. Never blame themselves. Once again, this is going to be part and parcel of Liz Truss's administration. Like Boris Johnson's administration, blame everyone but themselves. So when they F up, when they mess up, it will be always somebody else's fault. The EU or the public or the media or someone else. So I want to move on. So this was, wow. So as I said before at the beginning of the stream, Liz Truss probably is doing more damage to the union than Boris Johnson is. And I've said before too, and it pisses off a lot of people. There should be perhaps it could be an idea to have a statue of Boris Johnson in Scotland, made of something, I don't know, dog poop or something, but, for all the hard work he did to achieve Scottish independence, to bring about Scottish independence. No. Okay, I know I'm pissing off people by saying that. But maybe Liz Truss is doing a bigger job. Maybe she deserves a statue. No. Okay, I understand. But she definitely is helping Scottish independence along with statements like this.
Mario Rossi from Dalwerton in Somerset.
Mario Rossi. Like, what? Oh my God. Max, you're in for it. Mario Rossi. So, obviously of Italian descent. I don't know if he's Italian when he was a child and he moved to Britain. But a foreigner, and that's what he is, I assume, because his name is Mario Rossi. There isn't a more Italian name than Mario Rossi. I don't know if he's, it says Anglicized Scot from Somerset. A guy called Mario Rossi with a Scottish accent living in Somerset is complaining about Liz Truss.
Mario Rossi from Dalwerton in Somerset. What are you going to do to get Scotland on board? Because I'm sick to death hearing about Nicola Sturgeon trying to break up the union.
I'm sick to death. Then why don't... you're living in Somerset. You're not living in Scotland. And you were... this is a guy with a Scottish accent, so he moved from Scotland to England for some reason. And his family moved from Italy to Scotland, I assume, because he moved from Scotland. Okay.
And I think the best thing to do with Nicola Sturgeon is ignore her. Look.
And the union dies with rapturous applause. There you have it. The response of the decade. I'm going to ignore Nicola Sturgeon. So Nicola Sturgeon is not just some backbench MP, She's not even the leader of the opposition. She's the First Minister of Scotland. And the idea that Liz Truss would just say, I'm going to ignore her. You cannot... I'm not Italian. I'm just looking in the chat. Mario Rossi, Italian name, Scottish accent, and against independence. Yes. I'm not Scottish, but I'm extremely offended by this, because this once again shows complete and utter contempt the Tories have for the Scots. Like, even if you're a Scottish Tory, you're watching this, you're going, this is not good. Don't be saying these things. This does not help. It does the opposite. You would have better just saying nothing than actually saying this, because look, the Tories have never really supported devolution. They've been against devolution. They've been trying to chip away at devolution since its foundation. And Liz Truss understands that people within the Conservative Party are how can I say, fickle. They just want to hear the idea that, hear the words of, I'm standing up to Scotland. I'm going to stand up to Nicola Sturgeon. I'm going to ignore Nicola Sturgeon. This is fantastic for these people. This is what they want to hear. That's why she was applauded. She, in a sense, maybe she understands what the audience want. But this is extremely offensive to the Scottish people, because the Scottish people voted for Nicola Sturgeon. It's like when Ian Blackford stands up in the House of Commons and the Tories laugh at him, or Boris Johnson ignores his question, and even the Speaker of the House sort of ridicules him. This, once again, is not a ridicule of Ian Blackford. This is not just not answering Ian Blackford's question. This is ignoring the constituents. And it doesn't matter if it's Ian Blackford or if it's Lisa Nandy in the Labour Party. If you ignore their question, you're ignoring their constituents. You're treating their constituents like scum. And that's what the Tories are doing here. And this is what Liz Truss is doing, by saying, I'm going to ignore Nicola Sturgeon.
I'm sorry.
It's a bit difficult when she's First Minister, though. She's got a democratically elected position, just as you would.
I'm sorry, she's an attention seeker, Seb.
Did she appear in a tank? And did she ask somebody to pay... Did she charge the government... The government had to pay £20,000 for a professional photographer to take a picture of her in a tank? I don't think Nicola Sturgeon did that, but Liz Truss did. And it just shows, once again, this complete and utter disconnect from reality. It's not just I hate Scotland and I hate Nicola Sturgeon, but it's also this complete and utter disconnect. And you can see here, it says here, Liz Truss' dismissal of attention seeker Sturgeon will horrify Scots, says SNP. Liz Truss has been accused of trashing the unionist calls against Scottish independence after calling Nicola Sturgeon an attention seeker who ought to be ignored. John Sweeney, the Deputy First Minister and Nicola Sturgeon's closest ally, said Scottish voters would be absolutely horrified by Truss's obnoxious remarks made during the Conservative leadership hosting in Exeter on Monday evening. Unionist campaigners suggest that Scotland should be at the heart of the United Kingdom. It's like, at the heart of the United Kingdom. But ignored. Okay. Yeah, you're going to be at the heart, but we're going to ignore you. Because this is not just... this is not just ignoring Nicola Sturgeon. This is ignoring the Scottish government. So if there was a Tory running the Scottish government, they'd be ignored as well. They would be, because Liz Truss doesn't seem to be interested in actually working with Scotland. But, like, put politics aside. If you have to do something for the best, for I don't know, the pandemic, or you have to work together on something, you wouldn't say, I'm going to ignore Nicola Sturgeon. You can say, I don't agree with Nicola Sturgeon, but I'm going to work with her for the best of, for the British people. That's completely understandable. But she didn't say that. She said, I'm going to ignore her. So you imagine there's some crisis. Nicola Sturgeon calls up Liz Truss and Truss says, no, I'm not taking your call. Unionist campaigner suggests Scotland should be at the heart of the United Kingdom. How Scotland can be expected to be at the heart of the United Kingdom when the democratically elected leader of our country is, in the view of the person most likely to be the next Prime Minister of the UK, someone that should be ignored, is completely and utterly unacceptable, he told BBC Scotland. So I think Liz Truss has, with one silly intemperate intervention, fundamentally undermined the argument that she tries to put forward, that Scotland somehow can be fairly and well treated at the heart of the United Kingdom. Truss, the favourite ahead of Rishi Sunak to win the final round of the Tory leadership election, won cheers and loud applause from party activists when she said the best thing to do about Sturgeon's demand for independence referendum was to ignore her. She's an attention seeker, that's what she is. Endorsed on Monday by 9 influential Tory members of the Scottish Parliament, Truss referred to the fact that she attended primary school in Paisley. I wonder what the people of Paisley think about this. Southwest of Glasgow, before her parents moved to Leeds. I feel like I'm a child of the Union. The Union I'm trying to destroy. That I really believe that we are a family and we're better together. How does she treat members of her family like this, by ignoring them? Yeah, we're a big happy family, but I'm going to ignore you. And somebody, attention seekers should be ignored. And we have a picture of Liz Truss on a bicycle in Sydney. This very weird costume, what the heck was that all about? In Ukraine, in front of the two flags, on an aircraft carrier, in a tank, thinking. That's hard. In a drawing room in Moscow, and sitting in a chair in front of some apples, is it? Or some fruit? I don't know. At the last count, 8 Tory MSPs and 2 Scottish Tory MPs have endorsed Sunak's candidacy. The two candidates will face off each other for Scotland-focused hustings in Perth in mid-August, 2 weeks before voting closes for the leadership. This will be interesting in Perth. I really hope members of the SNP are not allowed in. No, they won't be allowed in, unfortunately. It'll be only Tory members. But I think it'll be an attempt by Truss to try and reach out to them. I don't know how she'll do that, but we'll see. Gareth, thanks so much. Liz Truss, DUP Tribute Act, ignore the cults. Well said, yes. Lloyd, thank you so much for that super chat. Liz Truss is a politically loose woman. She'll drop or switch her values to further her career or gain a few claps from a select audience. Yes, I agree 100% with that statement. We've seen it when it came to Brexit. She was on one side one day, on the other side the next day. She used to be a Republican, and now she's a royalist. She'll do anything for power. She'll jump through whatever hoops are put in front of her if she thinks it will help her career. And it's pathetic and it's disgusting. And unfortunately, it's very dangerous because she's going to be easily manipulated by the likes of the ERG. And that's why I think it was significant that when she met with them, they came out and said, yeah, she believes in Brexit more than we do. They obviously, the questions were probably, do you think Brexit is a good idea? Yes. Yeah, okay, well, you welcome aboard. Welcome aboard the ERG. They understand that it's good to have her on their side, and it's going to be a shit show if she's Prime Minister and she's trying to deal with the European Union, because she's going to be trying to avoid splits in the party, because if she goes down this road, she's going to create a trade war with Europe. But on the other hand, she's going to be trying to keep the ERG happy, because if they pull the plug, then she'll be out on her ear, and her career is over. She could be the shortest was it the shortest, not the shortest prime minister, the briefest prime minister in history. Magic, thanks so much for that. Better Together 2, Tory Unionist book. Once again, it's this idea that if you're a Tory in Scotland, you must be face palming your head off at this, because you would expect Liz Truss to say something, not to support Nicola Sturgeon, but to say something like, yeah, I'm willing to work with her, but only if she, does it on my terms, or something like that. She could appear tough, but not completely stupid. Anyway, guys, let's take a short break, comedy moment, and we'll be back in just a jiffy with some more news, and I'll see you after that. Enjoy.
Aye, so big deal. I did do a U-turn on the public sector pay rules, but at the end of the day, I'm allowed to do U-turns. Margaret Thatcher was a lady for not turning, but we are a new breed of Tory, so we do a bit of turning. And also, there's another thing that I want to discuss. People said to me, why did you be so nasty about Nicola Sturgeon and say that she is an attention seeker and she should be ignored? But honest to God, people don't know this, but Nicola Sturgeon's great auntie Agnes has got a next door neighbour called Eloise, and see Eloise has got a son Stephen, and see that son Stephen's got a best pal called Stuart who does my hair, and he says that he heard Nicola Sturgeon slagging me off in the back of a taxi all the way down to Wetherspoons. And I'll tell you this, and I'll say it for nothing, and I'll tell you right now, see if Nicola Sturgeon wants to have some beef with me, we'll date the White Proper Woman Day, we'll have a dance off, and I tell you what, I can do a paso doble like nobody can. Can't wait to see Nicola kicking up her slingbacks and seeing how she can dance me off.
That would be interesting, yes. A dance off.
Quick final check.
Okay, guys, so I want to move on. I know we talked a little bit about it at the beginning of the stream, but the energy companies are making massive profits during a cost of living crisis, and something has to be done.
On the markets,
This is a story of two winters.
BP posts its highest quarterly profit in 14 years as oil and gas prices rise.
Staggering profits and shattering poverty.
My family will be questioning food versus fuel.
Difficult decisions and dividends.
BP hiking its dividend and accelerated share buybacks to the fastest pace yet after profits surging.
The conversation BP wants to have isn't remuneration, but renewables.
Where does BP start the conversation about net zero?
The oil giant's plan is a transformation to a, quote, integrated energy company. But today, boosted by soaring oil and gas prices since the war in Ukraine, BP announced this.
A set of results that show us performing while transforming. During the quarter, we generated operating cash flow of $10.9 billion.
In just 3 months, BP made profits of £6.9 billion, a 14-year high.
We're in a cost of living crisis. It's not a great look, is it, for BP?
They're paying out $1 billion in this quarter in dividends and another $3 billion in cash returns to shareholders. There'll be a lot of people looking, thinking, yeah, I'm getting the wrong end of the stick here, very, very definitely.
All right, so how do you justify it? How do they justify it?
I think in the end, they're a price taker, BP. Remember, they were losing money a couple of years ago, hand over fist. Did they ask for a bailout? No. They went and helped themselves. They cut debt, they sold assets, they cut costs.
But if they were nationalised, then they wouldn't have to worry about losing money.
Our bills continue to rise and could hit £3,600 this year. Lynn is a single mum of 3 children and nowhere else in her budget to cut costs.
I'm already thinking about it now, about the winter. I just don't know where it's going to come from, apart from my food budget bill. I don't know where it's going to come from.
The cap on energy bills jumped from around £1,300 last winter to nearly £2,000 in spring. It was expected to reach £2,800 this October. Now it could hit more than £3,300, with another increase in the new year. So all in, a £2,300 increase in just 1 year.
How are people supposed to pay that? Like, one thing is Rishi Sunak saying, yeah, I'm going to give you a few £100, or I'll give you £1,000, or I'll give you £1,200. But if the increase is 2,300, and this is just on energy, once again, this is important, just on energy, what are people supposed to do? Now, some people will decide, I'm going to stop using energy, I'm going to stop using, I'm going to cut off my heating, I'm going to not use any gas, I'm going to go out and use the bus, stay on the bus, elderly people using their free bus pass to keep warm. That's not a solution. And there's talk about, and it was brought up to me, it was introduced to me at the last live stream, warm banks. Somebody asked me in I think it was a super chat, it was asked, what's your opinion on warm banks? And I didn't even actually know what warm banks were until it was introduced to me. So a warm bank is like a food bank, but instead of actually getting food, it's a place to stay warm for the night. So you're going to have families and individuals and couples and pensioners and everyone going to maybe schools or libraries where the heating is on, so they can have a bit of a sleep there. They can spend the night there so they don't freeze. And at the same time, you have energy companies making massive profits, but the bigger problem is not, it's a problem that energy companies are making massive profits, but the bigger problem is that the government do not intervene. This is a crisis. What is the point in having a government if they don't intervene? Their job is to intervene. Their job is to protect citizens, to make sure that people can survive. Once again, what is the point in having a government if they don't intervene? Gareth, thanks so much for that super chat. Because my ma and I can totally pop down to the local stockbroker and sell off some shares now, can't we? They helped themselves. Yes. They're a private company. Private companies benefit from, struggle during difficult times, and they benefit. But of course, he says, yeah, well, they didn't get support. They get subsidies from the government. Energy companies receive massive subsidies. This is a form of compensation. This is a form of welfare, public welfare. You talk about, cutting back on benefits. Well, these fossil fuel companies receive massive subsidies from the state, which is basically a grant, which is basically welfare. So when the guy was saying, well, they were struggling during the difficult times, to a certain extent, yes, but they were still receiving their subsidies. What is the point in giving them money if they're not nationalised?
The government has announced help of almost £1,200 for some families. More is needed, say charities.
Families are not going to be able to survive this without any extra help.
They're already getting lots of help from the government.
I mean, families are getting a little bit of help from government, but it's nowhere close to the extra expenditure that they have. And it also doesn't really address the underlying fact that families' incomes have been far too low for far too long.
Increased energy bills are a problem for the entire economy. There might be households out there that are able to cope with bills of £3,500, but while they're spending so much on energy, there's less in the pot for anything else, like eating out. And when spending slows, so does economic growth.
And this week, the European Union has officially gone into recession, or is looking at going into recession. So if the European Union is going into recession, the UK is going into recession. And it's likely the world is going into a recession. So yes, as he's pointed out here, if people don't have money to spend on other things, if they're using up all of their money to pay for food or to pay rent or to pay a mortgage or to pay their energy bills, they're not going to have very much left over to stimulate the economy. And then we slip into a recession. And then what happens is tax receipts decline, and then public services are cut.
As families prepare for increased bills, economists are preparing for a recession, and energy giants brace for yet more profits.
So a rise in profits for BP as people struggle to cope with bills. But there are questions too about the firm's impact on the environment. Our climate reporter Simon Roach is in Glasgow. Simon.
Well, as Paul said, many are going to be incensed that their energy bills are so high at the same time as seeing these record profits. But it's also muddling our efforts to face up to the climate crisis.
When it comes to the climate crisis, we should have been investing in renewable energy a long time ago, but we didn't. We should have been investing in insulating houses years ago, but we didn't. So politicians, and I have to point the finger at voters as well, who vote for these politicians, the politicians ignored the warning signs. Environmentalists were talking about it, scientists were talking about it, experts were talking about it, saying we need to invest in renewable energy. We need to move away from fossil fuels. We need to start investing in putting insulation into people's homes. This will reduce the amount of consumption, reduce the consumption of energy. And it was all ignored. Anyone who brought it up, look, environmentalists who were sticking themselves to roads and to and other things during protests were criticized by the public and criticized by politicians. And now they're the ones that were right. They were saying, if we don't deal with this crisis, we're going to end up in a very dangerous place. And we're still back to the same point of politicians sticking their head in the sand and voters voting for those politicians.
If you just take a look at this graph, it shows just how much energy bills have gone up in the past year. But it also shows, if you look at the red section, just how much that's been driven by wholesale gas prices. Now, if you compare that to changing VAT, policy costs like the green levy, those things will barely make a scratch on people's energy bills. And yet that's all that politicians have really been talking about. And yet that's all that...
Sorry, let me go back here. Exactly. This man is completely correct. When you hear about Liz Truss saying, yeah, I'm going to reduce, I'm going to get rid of the green levy, that's going to help people. Or Rishi Sunak saying, I'm going to cut VAT, I think this is the brown level. It's not going to have any real impact. The biggest impact is on the wholesale price. If you can reduce the wholesale price, you're going to help people out. But they don't want to reduce the wholesale price because that would require them intervening in the market. That would require them nationalizing these companies. And they don't want to do that. They don't want to do it for ideological reasons, but they also don't want to do it because they have connections to these companies, let's say it in that way. But it makes environmental sense to deal with this energy crisis the right way, and it makes economic sense to do the same. Now, it's not just energy prices that are rising. House prices are also rising, it seems. UK house prices rising at 11% a year despite cost of living crisis. This is insane. How is it possible? On the one hand, you have a cost of living crisis and house prices are going up. The UK housing market remained buoyant in July, with house price growth accelerating at a rate of 11%, according to the country's biggest building society. The average price home was £271,209 last month, up 0.1% from June, when taking account of seasonal effects and the 12-month rise in a row, said Nationwide Building Society. This took the annual change to 11% from 10.7%. The market has been surprisingly strong throughout the COVID pandemic, and despite the worsening cost of living crisis, it has been boosted by a strong jobs market, a persistent shortage of properties on the market, and a race for space among the rise in home working. So this is interesting. So a strong jobs market, I didn't know about that, but persistent shortage of properties. Yes, there's a shortage of So the government is not building enough affordable homes, so people still need homes. So there's a race for a home, and this, of course, due to supply and demand, drives up the price. The housing market has retained a surprisingly degree of momentum, given the mounting pressures on household budgets from high inflation, which have already driven consumer confidence to all-time lows, the Nationwide chief economist Robert Gardner said. While there are tentative signs of a slowdown in activity with a dip in the number of mortgage approvals for house purchase in June, this has yet to feed through to price growth. Gardner said demand continued to be supported by strong labour market conditions, in which the unemployment rate remains near 50-year lows. There's a shortage of workers as well now, and the number of job vacancies is close to record highs. At the same time, so the unemployment rate is low, but the number of vacancies is high. At the same time, the limited stock of houses on the market has helped keep upward pressure on the house prices. Of course, there are not enough houses available, so that, of course, drives up the price. The EY Item Club forecasting group noted that the cost of living pressures are being felt disproportionately by low-income households, primarily those in rented accommodation. Nicholas Finn, the managing director of Garreton Property Finder, said, while many estate agents remain busy, buyers' motivation is changing. Where previously price growth was fueled by a market brimming with confidence, today's market is being fueled by people's desperation to find a home before interest rates rise further and the cost of living crisis bites deeper. So it's not that people are investing in property, it's that people need a home now, and they're willing to pay a bit more because they're afraid that if they can't get on the property ladder now, they may never get on. And of course, it's becoming more and more impossible for the younger generation to get on the property ladder because of the ways of working have completely changed, in the sense that 0-hour contracts are normal today, and it's pretty impossible to get a mortgage if you want. Ironically, you can pay massive rent, but you can't get a mortgage. You can pay more in rent than you would getting in a mortgage, because the banks won't actually give you money to buy a home. There are people who are paying £1,500 in rent, but they wouldn't be able to get a mortgage of £500. DC, thanks so much for that super chat. Hi Max, if you had a magic ball and could see into the future, in 10 years, what would the UK look like? Still together, Tories in power, back in the EU. That'd be a wonderful magic ball, and I'd be as rich as Nigel Farage if I did. Let me see. In 10 years, what would the UK look like? I think, of course, Scotland will be gone. Scotland will be independent. Wales may be also on the road towards independence. It's likely that, I think it depends on a number of things, of course. If the Tories remain in power, if there's a general election before Scottish independence and the Labour Party win it, and they bring in proportional representation, then you're going to see a very different UK or England and Wales in the future. Proportional representation could actually put a brake on Welsh independence. For Scotland, no, it's not. It's too far gone in a sense. Too much damage has been done to the union. It's just a matter of time now. It's not a matter of if. But Wales is different, and I know this might upset many people in Wales, but I think there's still a chance that if Westminster could be reformed, Wales could remain part of whatever union is left. Northern Ireland, of course, is going to become part of a united Ireland. That's inevitable as well. So you're going to have England and Wales together. But it depends on what the Labour Party do. If they're able to win power and form a coalition with other parties and push through proportional representation, then you're not going to see the Tories in power. Now, you may see the Tories in power, but it would be a different Conservative Party. It would likely be in coalition with other parties, which would normally soften the more extremes within the party. So you would end up with very centrist parties. You're going to end up with, under proportional representation, you're going to end up with not centrist parties, but centrist governments, I should say. So you're going to end up with a centre-right or a centre-left government in the future under PR, instead of this far-right government that you have under Boris Johnson and likely Liz Truss. But back in the EU, not in 10 years, I'm afraid. It's going to take much longer than that. Doesn't mean that it shouldn't be, the wheels should not begin to turn. It doesn't mean that people shouldn't be trying to get in now. It just means that it will take a long time, because things will have to change. Whatever remains of the UK, they'll have to demonstrate that they are a worthy member. Look, the UK economy will still be very big, very important, but it'll be extremely diminished, and it won't have the same clout as it had when it was a member of the European Union. And to get back into the EU, it's going to have to jump through some hoops, and it's going to be difficult. You're going to have to sell it to the public. I don't know if it would be another referendum to join, or whether it would be just an act of parliament. It goes on to say here in this article, cash transactions make up just over a third of all deals, at 35%, partly reflecting the aging population in which more people own their homes outright. But properties bought for investments such as holiday homes or buy-to-let flats are also an important element of the cash market. Buy-to-let purchases involving a mortgage also remain higher than pre-pandemic levels. Sentiment is likely buoyed up by the fact that the rental demand remains strong, with upward pressures on rents, which may be encouraging landlords to enter the market, particularly if they view property as a hedge against inflation. And what you're having is you're seeing people who have money buying property, renting it out, and seeing that as a hedge, as they say here, against inflation. But that means that these properties are not available for younger people in particular to buy. So it's once again creating tighter demand, and it's driving up prices. I said sometime, I think it was one of the last live streams, I mentioned how the Tories aren't really interested in resolving this, because many of them make their money from property. So they're not interested in helping tenants, be them people living in homes or businesses renting property. Roisin, thanks so much for that super chat. There was another story I wanted to show you in regards to the cost of living crisis. There's an interview. This is on LBC. Yeah, this is financial expert David Buick. So this was, should electricity and gas companies be nationalized? And this is what financial expert David Buick said, who is, I think is a CBE.
Should the electricity and gas companies be nationalised? Could I actually make just a quick point that my company EDF, I believe, is the French national company, and in a time of high prices, all their profits are going to France. They're not going to help my country.
Okay, David Buick.
It's a tough opener, isn't it? For me, believing in free enterprise and capitalism, no. But
okay, he gets to a but first of all, so what is the problem here? You have energy companies making massive profits while people are struggling to pay their bills. And many people are being pushed into poverty and destitution because they can't afford to pay their bills. And bills is one part, of course. The other part is general inflation. But David Buick's response is, well, I believe in the free market, so no. Which is more important? An ideology or people's lives? Like an ideology, that how does it help? Okay, so the free market does wonderful things, yes, and I'm not talking about ending the free market here. I'm talking about energy bills. I'm just talking about this specific sector. This is something that's important. This is something that people rely on. People's lives depend on this. This is why it should be nationalized. I'm not talking about nationalizing everything. Some sectors are better under as part of the free market for innovation, for developing new technologies, for driving down prices. Sometimes it's better, to leave it to the market. But this is the consequence of leaving it to the market in this specific sector. Energy companies making massive profits and people going hungry, people relying on warm banks, people going on buses and trains just to keep warm during the winter. This is unacceptable.
But I think this is going to be a situation that moves on quite furiously in the next few months, because there are some questions to be answered. I mean, the thing, I read a statistic this morning that quite shook me, that apparently up until 3 months ago, people spent 4% of their earnings on energy. It's up to 15% now. And that is going to have a seriously damaging effect on retail come the fourth quarter, where I believe we will go into recession without any question of any doubt. I think it'll be short-lived, but I think that's exactly what's going to happen.
So, well, then I can respond by saying, well, that's retail's problem. We shouldn't intervene, because if these retail companies struggle and close, and other sectors as well, that's just the free market. See, once again, the problem with this free market argument is that many of these companies are subsidized. These energy companies receive massive subsidies from the state. So it's not a real free market. It's not them, if they close down, they close down. In many cases, if these energy companies did end up going bust, the state would intervene and help them out. Now, they haven't recently because they didn't need it, but you can guarantee if there was no petrol in the petrol station, the government would intervene. But because the petrol in the petrol station is very expensive, the government doesn't really want to intervene, because somebody's making money out of this. Just staying with this for a moment, and then I'll move on. But it's I want to read also your comments. BPC's largest profit in 14 years as energy bills. Sorry, yes, we already covered this. 9.6 billion pounds in profit. Sorry, there was another one I wanted to cover as well from the BBC. I think it was. Yes, the bills are going to rise once again, as we saw. Typical energy bills could hit £3,600 this winter, according to new forecast. And then we can see the graph here. So energy bills predicted to rise to £3,615 by January 2023. In April 2021, they were 1,138 and gone up to 3,600. This is unacceptable. It's not. It's going to break so many people. There's no way of getting around that. And as I said, there's no leadership at the moment. Boris Johnson's not a leader. He doesn't care. Liz Truss doesn't understand anything. And Rishi Sunak doesn't understand this problem because he doesn't live in the reality that most people do. So guys, I want to move on to another story. There's a bit of a fight taking place within the Labour Party at the moment between the leadership and members of the party on what to do about the strikes. It says here, Labour frontbench Lisa Nandy visits picket line amid strikes row. Lisa Nandy was pictured alongside union members from BT and Openreach striking at her Wigan constituency. An ally of Miss Nandy said she appeared to show support for constituents and had told the Labour leadership about the visit in advance. Last week, Shadow Minister Sam Tarry was fired after joining striking workers. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer said he fired Mr Tammy, who was the party's transport spokesman, after doing interviews without permission and making up policy on the hoof. Mr Tarry said workers should get pay rise in line with inflation in a media interview from a strike held by rail workers at London Euston Station. Labour's policy is that there should be fair rises through negotiation, and Sir Keir said shadow ministers needed to maintain collective responsibility. But unions and some left-wing MPs, Labour MPs, reacted furiously to Mr Tarry's sacking, with Sharon Graham, the General Secretary of Unite, saying the party was becoming more and more irrelevant to ordinary working people. Miss Nandy's visit to the picket line on Monday raised fresh questions about the party's policy on shadow ministers attending strikes. A Labour source said the position hasn't changed, and of course MPs can still meet their constituents and respond to issues affecting their area. So is a sort of interesting response here. Derek, thank you so much for that super chat. Max just had a €490 refund from my utility companies here in Luxembourg, where energy prices are capped. Luckily, UK escaped this nanny state here in the EU thanks to Brexit. Hang on, that's not right. Thank you so much, Derek. Wow, well done. €490 refund. That's about £400 more or less of a refund from the energy company because of the price cap. It's happening in EU countries. Why isn't it happening in the UK? Thanks so much for that. But it's people are desperate. So Derek is better off because of this refund, but also because energy prices are capped. They're not going to go up anymore. This is what needs to happen. But as you pointed out, in your comment as well, the nanny state, this would be seen if the energy companies were nationalised. The Brexiteers, the far right within the Conservative Party would call it the nanny state. They would say, oh, look, it's communism, it's socialism taking over. Jacob Rees-Mogg would be screaming from the rooftops about how this is a takeover by the state, it's communism. He would be on the side of the energy companies, not of the people struggling to pay their bills. That's what I've often said before about the European Union. It's not perfect. It has many flaws, but you can see how it's, at its core, there is support for the consumer. The consumer receives much better protection today than it did before. There's always more and more protection for the consumer. Is it perfect? No, it's not. There are a lot of faults. There are a lot of things that need to be fixed and looked at and reformed, but it's always improving. And the UK left that, and we're seeing it go really downhill at the moment. Thanks once again, Derek. For example, was it Reagan Elite? I lost the super chat now, but I think it was Reagan Elite, was it, that mentioned UBI? And a UBI, of course, being universal basic income that would help so many people at the moment. You would be able to provide people with perhaps £1,000 a month, where they could be sure that they'd be able to pay their bills. They could put something aside for the future. If they can pay their bills today, but they're worried about paying them in the future, they could put something aside, knowing that every month £1,000 is coming in. And there are pilot projects running at the moment. Once again, the biggest problem with the UBI is that the U part is being left out. It's not being universal. It needs to be much more widespread. Having it in a small community for a short period of time is not seeing the real advantages of UBI, because one of the aspects is peace of mind, knowing that every month £1,000 or €1,000 or $1,000, whatever, is coming into your bank account. You know, okay, if I want to start a small business, I know I have that to fall back on. If the company fails, well, I still have my £1,000 a month. That's what's important about a UBI. It's not just the money, it's the peace of mind, it's the security, which is fundamental. Many people can't sleep at night because they're afraid, what if I lose my job? What if I'm not able to pay the bills? What if I don't get enough hours? This is a real concern. And with rising energy prices, a UBI would be not a silver bullet. It's not going to be a panacea. It's not going to fix all problems, but it would definitely create a floor where people would not fall deeper. Need regulation. Regulation is blasphemy to Jacob Rees-Mogg. But back on this story about... so it's interesting how the Labour Party's response to this is Lisa Nandy was meeting with constituents. It's a bit sort of sneaky. Yes, in a sense, she was in her constituency and she saw some people protesting and she went out to see what it was about and she was meeting with them and listening to their concerns. She didn't protest herself, so she was attending, but she was not participating. That's probably the difference that the Labour Party want to make. But what way should Keir Starmer go with this? Should he join the protests? Should he step aside? Should he keep out? See, the problem for him is that if he joins the protests, well, then the Conservatives will use this as a stick to beat him. But if he stands on the outside, then he'll be seen as a hypocrite and he'll be seen as abandoning working people during a cost of living crisis. This is not just them complaining about, not enough coffee machines in the office or something like this. This is about being able to pay their bills. This is about them relying on food banks. This is about them having enough to feed their families. This is fundamental. This is about their worker protections for the future. The fact that many businesses just want to strip away those rights, replace some of these workers or all of them with agency staff. They are fighting for their careers, in some case for their lives. And it's important that Labour stand with them. But on the other side, you have Starmer and the upper levels of the Labour Party need to show that they're disconnected in a way that, we're going to be a government. We're not going to intervene with strikes and things like this, because this would be government interfering on one side or intervening on one side. And of course, if there are strikes, it would be difficult for a Labour government to pick sides. Now, the Labour Party say, look, if there won't be any strikes if we're in charge, because they won't need to go on strike, because we will govern correctly and we will provide workers with the whatever they need. Which I don't know if that's true, but it would be difficult for the Labour Party during a time of strike action. Anyway, guys, I want to move on to another story before we finish for tonight. Let me read some of your comments before we go on, because I think that's interesting. Will Lisa Nandy get sacked? No, she won't get sacked, because in a sense she wasn't participating in the strike. She was just visiting her constituents. He should support Labour. People who work. Starmer should change his party name. I'm not defending Starmer here, but I think his argument is, if I'm seen striking, then it would be seen as picking sides. Now, I think he should pick sides. I think it's, you are the Labour Party, you should be on the side of the workers. The workers are the backbone of society, the backbone of the economy. You need to be on their side. But I think there is this feeling that it's about trying to win over Tory or ex-Tory voters. Look, if I appear on the side of workers, then it's going to piss off these Tory voters, these right-wing voters, these people who used to vote Labour but switched to the Labour Party, used to vote Labour but switched to the Tories under Boris Johnson. I need to win these people back. And if I'm seen striking, these people are going to open their Daily Mail or their Sun or whatever and be very upset. Oh, look at, he's just a communist, he's like Jeremy Corbyn or whatever, and this is going to sink my chances. So it's difficult. It's not easy. It's not an easy thing to answer, and I think it is important to look at both sides. There are media outlets who will focus on one side and say Starmer is completely wrong. Starmer is a liar and a cheat and a swindler, and he should be gone. And he's doing it because he's a red Tory, and he's more of a Tory than a Labour Party. Look, I understand that anger, and maybe I'm digging a hole here, but I'm trying to see it on both sides. I'm trying to understand why he's doing this. I believe he's trying to do it because he wants to win power. Is it the right approach? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Maybe he should be striking with the workers, showing solidarity. I think one part of me says yes. Another part of me says if this is going to turn off voters, then you'll gain something in the short term, but you're going to lose an election, which is going to be much worse for these workers, because then they will have nobody looking out for them. You'll be stuck with the Tories for another 4 or 5 years, which will be detrimental to these workers. This is the beginning. Things are only going to get worse if the Tories remain in power. Labour in the UK is the left cheek of the same Tory arse, in my opinion, Max. I'm not disagreeing with... I don't think I'm going to disagree with anyone here, because I think we all understand that it's frustrating to watch Starmer sit on the sidelines. It's frustrating when it comes to workers' rights, to the protest, but also when it comes to Brexit. It's frustrating to have him avoid talking about Brexit, to be seen as sitting on the sidelines, when it's clear for everyone else to see that Brexit is a disaster, but he won't talk about it, that he won't touch it. But once again, the only conclusion I can come to is that he's doing it because he doesn't want to piss off certain voters. And he feels it's better to keep quiet about it than to be seen to attack it, which will help the Tories. Once again, it's frustrating. He's in the opposition. He can support the workers and criticize the Tories for the mess before. Once in power, fix it. It's a good point. Starmer should just let the red wall Tories to come to their own conclusions and talk to the real base. See, you don't win elections that way. This is the problem with first past the post. Under proportional representation, you build up a base, and then that guarantees you a victory. But with these marginal seats where people were willing to flip from Labour to Boris Johnson in the blink of an eye, these are the problem. This Johnson won with a very small number of votes. He didn't win a massive majority. It wasn't a massive swing to Boris Johnson. It was a swing in specific seats, and that was enough to win him an 80-seat majority. Because there's no point Starmer campaigning in Labour constituencies, because he's going to win those anyway. They're not going to vote Tory. But he needs to campaign in constituencies that are likely to vote Tory, or on the marginals. There's a slim majority that the Tories have won, or the Labour Party have a slim majority it's likely, there's a possibility of it flipping to another party. That's where you need to focus your energies on. And another problem for the Labour Party is that they are in financial difficulties. The party is pretty much bankrupt, and they don't have the financial resources to run a major campaign. So they need to focus on particular constituencies. So they're going to have to use whatever money they have to focus on those constituencies, and bet and hope and pray and do whatever they can to try and win that. Not bet, but to pray and hope that they'll win those over on whatever small resources that they have. Red Wall Max, somewhat, in a way, yes, the red wall, but blocks of wood never win elections. But I see, this is maybe where I disagree with you, Night Raven. I don't think it's going to be I don't think it's a referendum on do you want Keir Starmer or do you want Boris Johnson, or sorry, not Boris Johnson, Liz Truss. So I'm a bit confused. So it's not a vote for Liz Truss or Keir Starmer. It will be a referendum on the Tories. So do you want more of the Tories? And that's what people will vote on. People will hold their nose and vote Labour. Even people will vote for the block of wood. I don't think it's really a personality contest that's coming. Maybe it will. Maybe this is the way it will shape up. But I still think it's going to be a vote on a referendum on the incumbent. And I don't think that's going to work for the Tories because they've been in power for so long. There's a cost of living crisis. There's Brexit. There's nothing really in their favour. And I think the public are going to be tired of it. In the same way that, the Brexit vote was in some way a protest against the incumbent, against the status quo. And in 2019, there was this idea of voting against the status quo. Let's throw in Boris Johnson. He's going to shake things up. And I think people are going to say we're tired of the Tories, we're tired of the status quo. Maintain. Keir Starmer is of course not popular, but I don't think he needs to be popular. It won't be. It would be better if he was like a Tony Blair figure, not the Tony Blair policies, but just someone charismatic. It would be much better, but I don't think it's necessary. Anyway, I want to finish just with one story that is
Nancy Pelosi.
Wonderful. You thought the Ukraine war was coming to an end, or at least coming to some sort of crescendo, but no, don't worry. There's part 2. It seems China and Taiwan may be going to war.
He's arrived in Taiwan despite China warning of serious consequences if she visited the island. Beijing said the visit would undermine its sovereignty and security interests. The island nation is self-ruled, but China claims it as its own. We just witnessed those arrival pictures moments ago, and Joe Pike joins me now to react. But Joe, I just want to also mention we're getting some flashes of some of the headlines coming from Nancy Pelosi. She says America's solidarity with the people of Taiwan is more important today than ever. She says our discussion with Taiwan leadership will focus on reaffirming our support for our partner and on promoting our shared interest, including advancing a free and open Indo-Pacific region. She says this visit in no way contradicts long-standing United States policy, but that one line of referring to Taiwan as our partner will certainly muddy the waters because the US was meant to have a totally ambiguous position when it came to Taipei, and no doubt these sorts of comments, the arrival itself, will not help China's reaction.
Not at all. And they warned yesterday, Wilfred, of consequences if this trip were to go ahead. The highest level US visit to Taiwan for 25 years since Newt Gingrich, a previous House Speaker, in 1997. And the Chinese have kept to their word in terms of consequences. We have seen fighter jets, Chinese fighter jets flying close to the median line, that dividing line in the Taiwan Strait. We've seen army units put on high alert. And we've also heard in the last hour or so from the Chinese Foreign Ministry with a pretty strong message.
The US and Taiwan have colluded to make provocations first, and China has only been compelled to act out of self-defense. In the face of the US's unscrupulous behavior in defiance of China's repeated and serious complaints, any countermeasures China is taking will be justified and necessary. It is also the right of all independent and sovereign states.
Will be justified and necessary. What does that mean? Will there be countermeasures beyond what we've already seen in terms of these fighter jets and army units put on high alert. Certainly the real concern of the White House and of the Pentagon, of the National Security Council here in Washington, D.C., is that the Chinese could change their position on military aid for the Russians in the conflict in Ukraine.
So, oh my God, it just gets worse and worse. Now, was it right of Nancy Pelosi to visit Taiwan? Probably not. It was probably better not to do this because it will provoke China, but not for them to engage in some sort of conflict with Taiwan, but to change their position on support for Russia, where they may be willing to increase their support for Russia. I think there's a lot of backdoor deals going on between China and Russia, but certainly it will now be, taking place in the open, because the Chinese will be saying, well, if you're willing to back Taiwan, well, we're willing to back Russia. Number 3, thanks so much for that super chat. No single political party can ever claim to represent the whole country, especially after Brexit. We need a radical reform of the entire system. Yes. And I think you'd agree with me, proportional representation is the best way forward. You would have much better representation of political parties. It's likely that many, for example, the Liberal Democrats would increase their vote by, they would gain 70 seats. A lot of the smaller parties as well would gain a number of seats as well. You would have coalitions. You would have more coalitions, and it tends to soften the extremes. So you could have extreme right parties or extreme left parties joining coalitions, but they would have very minor roles to play, and yes, they would be given a few bones, they'd be tossed a few bones, but the government itself would be centre left or centre right, and you wouldn't have what's happening at the moment. But something has to change, and it really has to. I think it's so important, the next general election. I know everyone says it's the most important election, but really the next one is going to be the decider on whether the UK becomes a real democracy or not, because it's heading in the wrong direction at the moment. James Week, thanks so much for that super chat. As serious as this is, does this still constitute American neo-imperialism? I don't know. It's a good question, because this is once again the US. Is this the US showing solidarity, or is it about trying to throw its weight about? It's not getting directly involved in the war between Ukraine and Russia. It's providing support, of course, but if Taiwan was attacked, it's likely that the US would actually get more directly involved, and perhaps the US sees any threats to Taiwan as a threat to it, and they want to push back against China, but they've been watching China grow over the last number of decades. And I think wars like the one in Iraq really made it more and more difficult for the US to stamp its authority on the world stage. And it's also, put itself in a much more financially difficult position by running up massive debt to fund that war. So it's harmed the US both economically and politically, that war in Iraq, and and China is watching and growing as that went along. Many would see this as neo-imperialism, the idea that the US is getting involved here in Taiwan. This is in China, of course, and many Chinese allies would see this as an internal dispute. Why is the US getting involved now? Is it really about protecting Taiwan? Is it about holding back China? Or is it, once again, as you point out, an attempt to show the US as an imperial power?
So far, Xi Jinping has not, we understand, sent any military support to help Vladimir Putin and the Russians. Of course, President Putin will be very keen to get his hands on China's very high-tech drones. The involvement of the Chinese could, of course, completely change the balance of power in that conflict. And therefore, I think the concern in the White House is that this visit from Nancy Pelosi, this arrival you're seeing here in the airport in the capital, Taipei, could anger the Chinese so much they change their position on the issue of Ukraine. Certainly, this is not a brief visit. The fact that she's visiting late at night means she's staying overnight. Newt Gingrich, 25 years ago, only stopped for a number of hours. But it's also important, I think, to point out, Wilfred, that Nancy Pelosi's views on China, her hawkishness on China, her belief in international human rights, as she would see it, is entirely consistent. She's been consistent and has strong views on this in her decades-long career on issues like Taiwan, on Hong Kong, on Tibet, on the Uyghur genocide more recently. And as she reaches the end of that career, she's 82 years old, unlikely to be the speaker long after November's midterms. I think she knows the power and significance of this visit, but also that it's effectively really one of her final chances to make a big splash.
Please tell me this is not some sort of narcissistic attempt to be written into the history books, because this is not the time for such antics. If this is a real, attempt to protect human rights, I respect that, but I hope it's not the case of, yes, I want to be written into the history books. I want to be remembered. So guys, we're going to, of course, have to watch this event quite closely. Hopefully it will just be a storm in a teacup for a few days and then things will go back to normal. But there is a real concern that Russia will be reaching out to China, following this, asking them for support and saying, look at what the US has done to you. You need to help us out. So guys, before we finish, we have our one for the road. Remember, if you want, after the stream, we have our post-stream chat. We're going to talk about these issues as well. But before we do that, I want to enjoy this.
Hello and congratulations, soon-to-be Lord or Lady. Lord. Yes, if you're seeing this, then you have been handpicked to join the most prestigious club in the country, sometimes known as the Other Place or the Second Chamber. We do normally like to do these calls in person, but there are so many of you joining soon, and besides, the Prime Minister's busy, no doubt working on a new book or child. You might be thinking, why me? Why have I been chosen to join the UK legislature alongside former ministers, experts, and even a few bishops for some reason? What do I, a regular donor to the party, a former party treasurer, or a businessman who likes Brexit, delete as appropriate, have to offer? Well, we believe that anyone who still supports this government deserves a reward. And if levelling up doesn't mean increasing the level of our support in the unelected bit of our parliament, then I don't know what does. Plus, it's possible you're Northern. You will be appointed a life peer in Boris Johnson's resignation honours list. And if you don't understand what those terms mean, life peer means you have power but can't be sacked. A bit like a handsy DJ. And every PM gets a resignation honours list. Like in a normal job, when you get fired, you might steal a few things from the stationery cupboard and put a few prawns in your boss's desk. Well, think of yourself as a prawn, and the next government is the desk. I hope that's clear. I'm sure by now that you're already considering your title and wondering which of your outfits looks best with ermine, but before that, there is one little thing that you have to do. You have to agree to turn up and vote for everything we tell you to. I mean, the first bit shouldn't be too onerous. There is a very generous turning up allowance. And look, of course, we would expect you to use your independent judgment and carefully consider every piece of legislation that goes before you, as long as you then vote for it anyway. Don't worry, we won't ask you to vote against your interests. In fact, you might have lobbied for it before you became a lord, which would be neat. And remember, all of that human rights malarkey only really applies to those people. You know who I'm talking about. If it helps, think of yourself as a rubber stamp made of prawns. Please be assured that this is all completely above board. It's not bribery, it's the British honours system. It's not corruption, it's fine. If this all sounds good, and why wouldn't it, just pop us a quick reply to the address you normally send your cheques to, and no doubt we'll be seeing you on the red benches in no time. Oh, and if anyone is watching this video who isn't on our list, be aware that this is all a joke and we didn't mean any of it. Now, Suella says we're covered.
Well, Suella says we're covered. So guys, have a great week. I'll see you on Friday, same bad time, same bad channel. And for those who are on Patreon, I'll see you maybe after the stream on the post-stream chat in a few minutes' time. Otherwise, have a great night, stay safe, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Good night.